Early one morning of March 3rd, 1991, Rodney King and his friends were driving back from a night of drinking. Two officers noticed Rodney's car speeding on the freeway. When King heard sirens, he refused to pull over since he was on parole, and he should not have been drinking.
The officers pursued King, which turned into a high-speed chase down the freeway, drawing in more officers. When Rodney King finally pulled over, the officers got his friends out of the car and had some minor problems exiting. Rodney had a different story. While Rodney was exiting from the car, he reached for his back pocket. An officer thought he was reaching for a weapon, even though he was unarmed. Rodney was tasered twice by Officer Coons, then the beating of the batons began. Rodney was struck 56 times without pause.
Debe haber matado a un cara.
Because of the extent of the injuries Rodney received from the beating, he was taken to the hospital. There, King suffered from 11 fractures and many other injuries, including brain damage. 4 days later, on March 7th, 1991, a jury was put together for the prosecution of the officers involved. In the first trial that took place, officers Kuhn, Powell, Wind, and Briseno were all put on the stand. The officers were accused of violating King's civil rights. After consideration from the jury, all 4 officers were found not guilty and acquitted of all charges.
This verdict sparked a 5-day riot in Los Angeles during the spring of 1992. The riot started in protest of police brutality and racism. Although the riot quickly turned into not only a political war of blacks against whites, but as well as blacks against Koreans. This is because at the time of the Rodney King trial, there was a lot of tension between the two races. And many believe the reason why the riot was so intense was because, in the case of Rodney King, it gave the black community an opportunity to express their frustration. But sadly, the way they chose to do so was through violence. The U.S. Army had to be called in to restore peace in the city. By the time they did so, there was 53 dead, 2,383 injuries, almost 7,000 fires, and $1 billion in financial losses to the city. Because of the backlash Los Angeles, the LAPD, and the court received, the 4 officers were put back up on another trial. This time, the outcome was different. Officers King and Powell were found guilty and sentenced to 30 months in prison. Although officers Wind and Briseno were acquitted of all charges, many people saw it as a start of fair justice towards the black community. And for Rodney King, well, he was just simply happy to have the jury find at least one guilty.
Rodney King is the subject of police brutality, a miscarriage of justice. His case is similar to Kill a Mockingbird because he's the victim of racial profiling and a severe punishment because of their skin. It is also similar to Kill a Mockingbird because in court, Rodney King was powerless and had 3 of the 4 officers charged acquitted, and in To Kill a Mockingbird, Tom Robinson's word meant nothing and he got convicted of a crime despite obviously being innocent.
A common theme between the cases of Rodney King and Tom Robinson is ignorance.
In the novel, white supremacists in the jury turn a blind eye to all of the evidence proving Tom Robinson innocent because they want a conviction.
This is shown in the novel when Judge Taylor says with apprehension,
"Guilty, guilty, guilty, guilty."
This situation relates to the Rodney King trials because in his case, the jury turns a blind eye to the brutality the police inflicted on Rodney King because they wanted the charges on the police dropped. Another prominent theme in both To Kill a Mockingbird and the Rodney King trials is the loss of innocence.
The LAPD officers lost their innocence when the public found out that they are racist and cruel. Most people look up to the LAPD, but when they saw the video, they became afraid of them. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Scout and Jem lost their innocence during the trial when they thought Tom was going to have a fair trial and he was going to be found innocent. But they found out that was not true, and their town was racist. They knew this when the jury came out and did not look at Tom because, quote, a jury never looks at a defendant it has convicted. This is when they lost their innocence.
The trial in both To Kill a Mockingbird and the Rodney King case is an example of a symbolic event, and the trial itself is a representation of a miscarriage of justice.
In To Kill a Mockingbird, Thomas found guilty after all the evidence proved otherwise.
After the trial, Scout narrates how, quote,
It was Jem's turn to cry. His face was streaked with angry tears as we made our way through the cheering full crowd. It ain't right, he muttered, all the way to the corner of the square where we found Atticus waiting.
This quote proves how even a kid like Jem can understand that the verdict was not fair. In the case of Rodney King, the evidence clearly shows all the officers going too far in beating Rodney, whether it be actually striking him or not stopping each other. Even with the given information, only 2 officers were convicted, which shows a miscarriage of justice. Another theme relating the novel To Kill a Mockingbird and the Rodney King beating is the importance of moral education. All throughout To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus is raising Jem and Scout to be open-minded, respectful people who always consider situations from a different point of view. And they also learn how to solve problems with their words. In doing so, Atticus is raising children who will be respectful adults once they lose their innocence. This is shown during a conversation between Atticus and Jem. Jem says, "How could they do it? How could they?" To which Atticus responds, "I don't know, but they did it. They've done it before, and they did it again tonight, and they'll do it again. And when they do it, it seems that only children weep." This quote proves that children are born with good morals, but it is the adults in their lives that shape them into who they are in the future. In the case of Rodney King, it is shown how important it is to have a good moral education. This is because if the angry citizens of LA had a good moral education, then they could have dealt with their frustration through reason instead of violence.